put on the screen. Thank you. Okay, Yabom, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It is such a joy and a pleasure to be part of your Golden Jubilee. Congratulations. Happy birthday, Joanne. And I'm here for it. I'm here for you, wishing you all the best and many more days, weeks, years, a lifetime of growth and learning together. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to be hosting this conversation with you in this masterclass series and to be sharing with you and inviting you into conversation around the power of your story in your transformative learning and leadership. In fact, the power of your story and transformation. And so over the next hour and a bit, I will read some things. I'll invite you to get present to your own stories and to go into conversation in breakout groups to share with each other. And then we'll just have a conversation. I'll welcome your questions and any questions you have, Joanne, and just launch our weekend in this way of reveling in our own stories and what they mean to us and where they might take us into the future. I want to acknowledge, especially as we end this week, where we had our first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, that I am joining you virtually for this conversation from Chewekmek Yulu, so from the lands of the Takamloops to Chewekmek peoples, and the place we colonially call Kamloops. And it's been a time of reckoning here, especially in addition to the reckoning across the world. And so this topic about story is so central to all kinds of transformation, whether that means that we need to dismantle to rebuild, or whether we're trying to create a new. And so I think it's very relevant and very timely to be hosting this as the last topic in Joanne's 50th birthday masterclass series. And so I think by now, as we've gone through learning online with the pandemic, we all know these things. Just a reminder, and Joanne, we will do breakouts. So if you want to co-host me as well, just to make that easy, that would be great. But just a reminder to stay on mute. As Joanne mentioned, she's recording. I'm going to invite you to use chat a few times, and I will invite you to come off mute and on the mic and share reactions and reflections, as well as we'll spend time in breakout groups. So really what we're going to do is experience resonant stories, the power of creating alternative narratives, especially when we're in narratives where we feel stuck, or narratives that are no longer serving us. We want to lean into what it means to define for ourselves beyond the social definitions that are put on us, but to define for ourselves the lives that we want and the lives that we're creating for ourselves and for and with others. And then just an opportunity to hear from you in terms of how the ideas we share about using story might serve you in your life and in your futures. So what is story? When I talk about story, what am I talking about? What is story? I have two quotes for you just to underscore what I mean as we go through this conversation. There was an American comedian, Fred Allen, who once said, "A human being is nothing but a story with skin around it." I like how visual that is. I like how visceral that is and how simple it is. The reality that we are human because we have story that we can tell. The reality that what distinguishes us in the animal kingdom, if we go to really the basics of biology and science, is that we have language, at least the language that we we can share to communicate with each other in the way that we do. And so that allows us to make meaning of things around us and to have and to tell and to share story. And then I like this one that is very appropriate for today. It definitely comes from the African continent. It was um, originally attributed to Chinua Achebe. In more recent times, it's been attributed to a woman by the name of Nozipo Marere. And so I'm attributing it to both of them, just while that is playing out. Until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Um, this quote has many meanings, but it's anchored in many things, even some of the things we're experiencing this week, and in this era and in these times, as we get present to and talk about things like justice and equity, and as we talk about decolonization, and as we talk about creating a more equitable future with social equality for all, no matter who you are or how you define yourself. This quote reminds us, for example, that we have to pay attention to the biases in the stories we tell. We have to pay attention to the biases in our history books. And beyond that, once we pay attention and understand those things, we have to tell our own stories. We have to tell multiple and nuanced perspectives on stories, because what that allows is for our humanity to have as broad a worldview as possible. And it allows us, even if we have a singular or a certain worldview because of where we're born, because of where we grow up, which is normal, but it allows us to expand that worldview because we have access and we're willing to look at and connect with many different ways of knowing, many different stories, and enter into the transformation that comes with that. And so, as Joanne said earlier, a lot of my work is about sharing broader and multiple perspectives around African leadership narratives, around global African identities, a lot of which was anchored in my own stories, in my own experience of being a Black African woman born in Germany who went back to West Africa with her parents and grew up in Sierra Leone, and sometimes encountered there a narrative around, are you really Sierra Leonean? Because I wasn't born there. And yet coming back to the West and being hit often, very often, with the question, where are you from? Or where's your accent from? All these ways in which well-intentioned questions to connect actually land as interrogation and microaggression, because they're devoid of context and they're devoid of relationship. It's one thing to have a relationship with someone, a growing relationship, to share of yourself, to share of your own identity, and then inquire into the other's identity. It's another to meet someone at a grocery store and immediately interrogate their identity, which in today's world is so complicated and so multi-layered and multifaceted that for sure these random stranger interactions in which we perpetuate really the negative narratives and stereotypes about where people are from and ascribe meaning to that in a certain way do not serve us. And that is my belief, and that is my experience, and that is certainly what the literature and evidence is showing us. So how do we create better futures? Because we really are willing to lean into story, to learn and to engage with people in a way that builds relationship and creates social equality and equity into our future. That's what story gives us. We know, of course, Joanne, as you're Nigerian, I'll be remiss in this story to not also mention Chimamanda and her work and her TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, that really popularized and helped people understand the danger, how dangerous it is to attach a single story to an entire people group and what that creates in the sociology of our humanity. And that is what leaning into our stories in their complex, multifaceted nature allows us to break. It allows us to break out of single stories and narratives and to define for ourselves who we are and who we want to be in the world. And so I'll just make a few comments about this is so important in today's world because we are in this zone that I call the gray zone of change, where we're in one system that has existed, that has dominated for a long time, and we're breaking out of that. We're creating a new reality for humanity, but that reality is unknown and it's unknowable. We're sitting at this place of complexity at the edge of chaos. And when I say this in these times, I just simply refer to all of our collective global lived experience of going through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been complex in all the ways that we've all experienced, and we've been on this edge of chaos so many times. How does the virus spread? What can I do and what can't I do? What do we know about the vaccines and what don't we know? Should I take it? Should I not take it? How do I keep myself and my family safe? The chaos we all experienced at the beginning of the pandemic when we were all running out to buy toilet paper, at least in the West, and, or when we all realized that streaming was keeping us connected to the world, and what that meant. So we've been at this edge of chaos. But what takes us past that is the stories of resilience, and the stories of deep resonance that we'll step into, which is our own stories that define for us our identity and our purpose, our personal stories that remind us, you know what? I've been in a complex and chaotic situation before, and this is what I did to stay grounded. I'm going to apply those things now, and I'm going to invite other people into a different kind of space. Because I don't know about you, but staying in that environment of complexity and chaos all the time, certainly from the social sciences, we know it doesn't serve us. It might keep us safe because our primal brain goes into fight or flight, and that's all that is. And it's normal and it's our instinctive response. But at every point in time, as you'll see me share later, we have the capacity, because of the power of our brains and the power of story, which gives us mindsets, gives us minds, mental models to go to. We have the power at every step to make a choice. And we can choose new narratives that better serve us. And we can create worldviews and environments that better serve us. That is entirely up to our humanity to choose. It's up to us. And so breaking out of complexity at the edge of chaos, creating system B requires of us choice. And that is really what I want to invite us into today. So I won't say too much more about this. This is just underscoring what it means to be in the gray zone of change. The biggest thing when you're in that gray zone is to recognize it, to recognize, oh, there are many questions. There's no simple answer. It's chaotic. And then to go to, what is my choice? What do I choose? What story do I want to be in? I can be in the waters that we're all swimming in, or I can help create alternative space and an alternative story that will help us not only survive and be resilient, but thrive and transcend the chaos of those moments that can keep us stuck. Same thing with the trauma that's created in these gray zones. Our work now as humanity is to recognize that when we're in gray zone, yes, there's traumatic context. And trauma is simply recognizing that there's been events of seismic proportions. I love that terminology that's used in the literature for trauma. Seismic means earthquake. And in colloquial terms, I love how humanity, we know these things from ancient wisdom and we know it instinctively because we use it in everyday language and we joke about these things. We say, that event rocked my world. An earthquake will rock your world. Events of seismic proportions will rock your world. The COVID-19 pandemic rocked our world. The realization that certain groups in society were having the worst impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic really reinforced what we already knew about social dynamics. But when you put that on top of protests and violence that happened against Black lives, and then the discoveries of indigenous unmarked graves, these things have all rocked our world. And from the world of transformation, we actually know that and again, in the colloquial, we say, I had to step out of my comfort zone. Because in the literature on transformation, we know that in order for you to move from status quo into the frame of mind that allows you to see differently, to think differently, and to feel differently about things in the world around you, and therefore to start to show up differently, your world actually has to be rocked. Now, it doesn't always have to be rocked negatively, but certainly traumatic events that rock our world can often usher us into transformation. And that is the opportunity, again, that we have when we recognize, hey, we're in this place of a gray zone. We're in this place where everything seems complex and at the edge of chaos. And you know what? We're also experiencing individual and collective transformation. And just to call out that individual and collective trauma. And just to call out that where you experience those individual traumas, please get the support and the help that you need. And that is required through whether that's counseling or clinical support or community support. Right now, as we go through this, I'm going to refer to traumatic events as I have been from the collective lens, organizationally and societally, but the reminder and the invitation that when our worlds have been rocked individually, also we go through these intense emotional and psychological impacts. And please get the support you need in whatever form you need to get that will help you, again, choose to not only survive, but to make choices that help you thrive and transcend that trauma. Because the body of work that I do my research in and work from is called posttraumatic growth. Because we know, as you'll see me share a bit more shortly, that even when there's been traumatic impacts, there is possibility not only for that stress response and not only for a resilience response, but for a growth and transformative response. Because when our worlds are rocked, it ushers us into this opportunity to try to make sense of the conflicts we're experiencing, to try to make new meaning of the emotions we're experiencing, and to come to the other side with new meaning and a new way of being in the world. And that is the opportunity we have. So we can move beyond the emotions, is all this slide is meant to show. We really can. We know from this proverb that I can't find the country reference for, but we know it is rooted in the Arabic language and attributed to somewhere in North Africa. No matter how hard it may get, a way or an eventual comfort will be provided, because after hardship comes relief. Again, in our everyday parables and aphorisms, we say things like, there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We say things that there will be sunlight after the darkest night. We understand that in our humanity, our experience has been, we go through these cycles. And yes, we might go through hardship, but there's something on the other end. There's light on the other end. And we can actually make choices that help us get there faster. And so these are just some images that further underscore the things I've already said and summarize them. And so I've already described the reality of going from status quo, our normative selves, to some kind of event that rocks our world, and the three choices that we have and experiences that we go through. The one where our psychological and emotional functioning is reduced automatically. This is normal stress response. And this is what this is where we are when we say things like post-traumatic stress, or that experience of traumatic injury. When we go through things that are not normal, I want to be clear, it is normal for us to have an impact that responds to, this is not normal. It is not something that helps me thrive in my humanity. And just like when we fall, we bruise ourselves and have a physical injury, we do have emotional and psychological injuries. And that creates these stress responses that we find ourselves in. The other thing that occurs is this possibility for resilience. A lot has been said and talked about resilience in these times. And the classical definition of resilience is bouncing back. So we fell down, we bruised ourselves, we feel the pain, we cry for a moment, we stand up, we bounce back, right? That is the classical definition of resilience. And it's good. We want to be able to go from stress response to getting a grip, as we would say again, get a grip on ourselves and stand up. We bounce back. What I love and talk about and research and put before us today is there's a third possibility that's often left out. And that's the possibility not only to bounce back, but to bounce forward, which is the way I think about the growth mindset and post-traumatic growth after we've had traumatic stress and traumatic injuries. We can not only bounce back, but we can also bounce forward to a higher level of functioning. Again, just to use the rudimentary example of falling down, bruising ourselves, and then standing up. If we want to learn, if we want to grow, we also go, why did I fall? What was in the way? What can I create so that I don't stumble and fall again? And in fact, so that I can help other people avoid this experience of falling down. That is growth. That is, in fact, post-traumatic growth. And often we get there because we fell. Sometimes if we just walk by an obstacle and we never bump our foot on it and we never bruise ourselves and we never fall, it's almost like we don't see it. It's not in our worldview. It's not on our mental map. So other people might be falling, but we don't pay attention. But the minute we fall, and that's the thing about the transformation possibility after something rocks our world. We fall and we go, how come I never noticed this obstacle? Why did I fall? Was it always here? As those questions flood us, that is what creates the opportunity to question what had seemed normal. And that process of questioning what had seemed normal, of contending with it, of making meaning individually or in community, is what leads us to the possibility of transformation. Because all of a sudden we hear all these perspectives. We hear from the people who say, I always fell on that thing. It's always been there. I kept trying to move it and nobody was listening to me. And you're going, what? How is that possible? Because it wasn't on your mental model, and now it is. So then the opportunity is to collectively work on transforming that situation. So in fact, nobody stumbles and falls on that rock going forward. That would be post-traumatic growth. That would be transformation, individually and collectively. And that's what story brings us into. This is just to summarize that this idea that we have choice between when an event happens to us and our reaction and response, we have a choice. Many writers have written about this. And again, these are things we know from ancient wisdom. In Western literature, Piaget and Keegan have written about it. In African literature, Bami Saminang has written about it, the zone of development and change that is available to us. And what I'm going to invite you into in a moment with your stories is what I have found from my research and practice and have written about is this idea that when I have done research with transformational leaders who have had significant traumas in their past, in their history, and yet were recognized or nominated by their communities as transformational leaders. And then when you look at the work they've done in the world, it's just amazing what they're doing. To meet them, you wouldn't even realize some of the experiences they've gone through. Every single one of them has a certain story. They all have stories, of course, but they have a certain story. And that is a resonance story, which is at the heart of the choices they have made for transformation. And that is the resonance story that actually pivoted them from resilience, from traumatic stress and maybe resilience from this zone up into this transformation zone. And the beauty of that is once they anchored to their resonance story, nothing moves or shakes them, and they just keep on their journey to transformation and keep on the work that they've committed to make a difference in the world. And so I say that resonance is at the heart of the learning zone that evokes transformation, especially in the context when there's been stress and trauma. And actually, as I'm finding in any context, this ability to anchor to resonance ushers us into transformation. And it gives people an opportunity to anchor to identity and to purpose. So let's say more about that. What is resonance? Resonance is that pivotal point that ushers you into transformation, and it happens through resonance stories. And so what is a resonance story? A resonance story is a personal, and I want to be clear, it's a personal story. It is yours. It is from your life, your past life experience, and it deeply connects you to your identity and to your purpose in the world. Now, stories can be expressed many different ways. So I want to underscore here that stories can be written, they can be verbal, they can be metaphors, they can be expressed in many different ways. In this space, we will share in that African oral tradition of telling our stories verbally. And if you are one that likes to express your story through metaphoric and symbolic forms, please draw also, as I invite you in a moment to reflect. And so please make sure you have a writing implement, or just be prepared to reflect on your story, your story that has brought you here in a moment. And I'll give you more specific framing in a moment. So resonance stories. This is what they are. It's yours, it's personal, and it deeply anchors you to identity and to purpose. Here are some characteristics of resonance stories. Again, it's a remembrance from your past life, could be recent past or from childhood. Deeply connects you and signifies your organizational or life purpose. This is the story that you go to in your mind when you are working in a purpose-driven way. This story can be thought of as a trigger with a quality of nostalgia. It is a meaningful story, in other words. It is very meaningful to you. And because of that, it can be emotional. But that emotion can be positive as well. It can run the spectrum from positive emotions to negative or sad emotions. And again, I want to say there's nothing wrong with that. Running the spectrum of emotion simply means we're human. We feel. And this is a good thing. It's part of our humanity. And so the realization that you can have a story on the spectrum of emotion. And what I love about that is I researched and interviewed with these transformational leaders that started me on this journey to talk about and write about resonance, is even when your resonance story runs the spectrum and maybe is on that end of negative emotion, what it does though is have you focus on the transformation possibility where you might be saying, I went through this negative experience and I never want anyone else to ever experience it again. Therefore, I do these things and I will keep doing these things and I will keep running this community project and I will keep running my business that intentionally looks for and hires people from a marginalized social category in which I grew up. And I will keep doing that over and over again because I don't want anyone to experience what it is that I did in my life, whatever that may be. That's the power of resonance stories. And like I said, it equally can be a happy story. It can be when I grew up in a well-functioning, supportive family, and then I went out into the world and realized this is not a common experience. I thought to myself, why can't it be? And therefore, I do this work to support families and make sure that everyone has the kind of happy childhood that allows them the privileges that I experienced. So, on the whole spectrum, what this ushers you into is this possibility of being and creating transformation in the world for yourself and for others, because it provokes this insight, this deliberate meaning making to make sense of the world where it doesn't make sense anymore. That happy narrative as a child served you and you were a child, so maybe you were oblivious to the realities of others. And then when you're confronted and encountered with different experiences, it rocks your world. And in that rocking of your world, it forces you to make meaning differently and then to choose to be different in the world. So that is resonance. It is this experience, as this Sierra Leonean war survivor, Mariatu Kamara, wrote in her book, The Bite of the Mango. It is this experience of a moment where, because she had gone through traumatic war atrocities, she lives in Canada now. I'm not sure if she's still here, Joanne, but she lived in Toronto for the longest while. And she's a war amputee. She lost her arm to atrocities in the war. And she writes and speaks and is just big personality out there, calling people to do different things so that no child has to experience war atrocities, which we know continue in the world today. Mayatu talks about experiences, being a happy child who loved to dance and letting go of dancing because of all of the experiences she had gone through. But then someone invited her to join a dance troupe. She wasn't going to do it, and she wasn't going to do it. And then she stepped into the dance troupe. I think I can't remember exactly the story, but she stepped in either for a practice set or, just showed up and decided to jump in. And it was the act of dancing that in an embodied way reminded her of who she was before all the things she had gone through. And she wrote this: in that moment, something in me had changed. I knew now that I could look forward and back without any regrets at the same time. That is resonance. That is transformation. That is the moment, even when you're reading the book, the experience of the narrative changes from that moment forward. If you're paying attention, the storytelling changes. Her languaging of her experiences changes. That was the moment of a resonance story anchoring her to new identity and to purpose without regretting or letting go of the traumatic past. And so earlier on a slide, you might have seen a note where I said resonance and post-traumatic growth can coexist with traumatic injury. It doesn't mean that every now and then you won't wake up stressed. Doesn't mean every now and then these are characteristics of traumatic stress, right? Hypervigilance or recurrent nightmares sometimes. It doesn't mean that those things will never occur again, ever, just because you hit resonance. But it does mean that those things can coexist with post-traumatic growth. It means that you can catch yourself in hypervigilance and go, okay, I'm in a different place, I'm at a different time, and my work in the world is to make sure no one has this experience that has me every now and then back in an experience of being triggered and being in hypervigilance or finding myself unable to sleep because on the news, there are children in Syria that I'm worried might have had the same experience that I had. This might be Mariatu, right? Knowing her experience and hearing the news might be a trigger for her, but it doesn't mean she's not going to get up the next day and go do the next talk that she's scheduled to do, because growth and transformation can coexist with traumatic experiences. And so here is the invitation. What is a story from your life? It could be during this pandemic we have gone through. But actually, I think as we do this work together, as we go through this work together, as a celebration also of Joanne. And Joanne, I know you're very alive to the full spectrum of things I've just described. But as we anchor to resonant stories, let's just leave it broadly to stories from your life, right? And it could be anything, again, on the spectrum of your life experience, but stories that anchor you to the need to celebrate your identity and purpose, to celebrate who you are. So here is Joanne celebrating a golden jubilee. And so what is a story from your life? It could be to a person, to an event. I'll put this back up in a moment, to a thing. It's just a story with a quality of nostalgia that deeply connects you to purpose in your personal and organizational life. This is a story that anchors you to why it's important to celebrate your life, and therefore to make meaning of what it is that you are doing now and into the future with this precious, precious lives, these precious single lives that we've been given, and that we're celebrating here through Joanne, both her life and all of our lives. So what is a story from your life? I'll put this in chat. A story with a quality of nostalgia that deeply connects you to your purpose as you celebrate your purpose personally or organizationally, as we celebrate with Joanne today. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to start reflecting on this. I'm going to give you a minute or two to do this. And then a heads up that I'm going to invite you into breakout groups to share your stories, to share your resonant stories with each other. Okay, I'm going to put the question stem in chat. This is deliberately a big question because it's a question that invites you into meaning making. And that is not meant to be done lightly. So take the question, interpret it in whatever way is so for you. What is a story from your life that deeply connects you to your purpose personally or organizationally as we celebrate Joanne today? I'll give you a moment just to get present to that. And then I'm going to read a few question stems to help you break that down a bit further. And then I'll invite you into breakouts, to a story sharing circle, as I call it. Please reflect. I invite people to just write your stream of consciousness at this point. Write whatever's coming up for you. And again, if you're a visual person, a visual learner, feel free to draw what comes up for you, right? Draw something that captures that trigger story that is coming up for you. And here are a few questions to help you break it down a bit. What about the story or moment that's coming up is creating resonance for you? Remember, resonance invites you into identity and purpose and to transformation. So what about the story is inviting you into a new and different way of thinking and being in the world? What purpose does it evoke for you? When you tell the story, what is the purpose that this story led you to? How does it shift your connection to others? Because that's how transformation becomes real, is it shifts our connection to others. It shifts our worldview. So how did it shift? How did this story shift how you thought about the world? And as we celebrate, this is the question I love most, and it's one that comes out of resonance stories. How has it helped you better value life in general? Whether that is your life, the lives around you, family, community, how has this story helped you to better value life? And that's the story I want us to, the question I want us to really hold in this space. How has our resonance story helped us to better value life? And what actions did it call you to? So I'm going to invite you now to go into breakouts and share these stories with one another. We're going to take about 15 minutes in breakouts. There's going to be, we're going to try for 3 people in each breakout room. So for each person, I'm going to ask you to take about 3 minutes to share your story, right? So about 3 minutes to tell your story, and then give an opportunity for the other 2 people to take a minute each to reflect back to you the impact of hearing your story, but in a particular way. So when you're listening to somebody else's story, the invitation is really to listen, right? This is a sharing and listening exchange. It's sacred space. This is not for you to evaluate each other's stories. This is not for you to judge each other's stories. As a listener, suspend your judgment. You are not there to fix anybody or to caretake or to say, oh, me too, that happened to me. You're there simply to receive someone's story and to learn, to get present to what does this trigger for me? What does this story tell me and what does it expand in my own worldview? So what you're listening for is the gift of the story you're hearing. What is the gift of the story you're hearing? So you're really there to witness another human being share a small part of their life, and to receive a gift from them. And as a storyteller, share what you want to, be vulnerable, don't censor yourself, allow yourself to share. There is power in sharing our stories. It's magical, I think. We can tell ourselves the story in our head. We can talk to the mirror, but there's something about reflecting to another human being that invites us into deeper meaning making. And that's the power of storytelling. It allows us to go deeper, even though it's our own story and we knew it. So I invite you not to censor and to allow yourself to share and be witnessed and see what happens beyond your self-talk, even as you tell the story. So 3 minutes, tell your story, no more than that. It's deliberate, you're just telling the essence of the story. 1 minute from each partner to say, thank you. Here's the impact of listening to your story. This is the gift I got. Okay, does that make sense for everyone? Sharing, listening, receive a gift. Now I see that some people coming on. If you end up with someone in your group that's just come on now, please just explain to them and go straight into the process. If you can help us with that, that would be great. So this is what you're gonna do. And I'm just going to stop sharing so that we can get you into these breakout rooms. There are 18 of us, so we should have perfectly 6 rooms other than our host and co-host. Story sharing, what is a story from your life that deeply connects you to your purpose personally or organizationally, as we celebrate Joanne today. I'm just going to pause to see if there's any questions at all. Okay, I'm going to invite you into breakout group. Enjoy your story circle. Welcome back. There's still about 10 seconds, so we'll just wait to make sure everybody's back in the main room. Okay. Well, welcome back. Thank you for taking the time in breakouts to just talk together and to share story. And so what was the impact on you of locating your story and sharing your story with one another? Would love to have a couple of you, at least 3 of you, come on mic and share with us. And also others, feel free to put in chat. What was the impact? You had an opportunity to locate and share a resonance story. What was the impact on you? The floor is open.
Hello, this is Kimani.
Hi, Kimani. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was in a group of, we were 3 of us, and I think the stories that have been shared in there, though we are from, very different, located differently on the globe, the stories resonates quite significantly with parts of what I have lived through or what I have experienced in myself or through others. And I think it was a moment of appreciating that sometimes it's not about me, it's also about others and what they are able to go through, that also I go through at times, and telling me that it's in the course of life. So that was an opportunity. Thank you for giving us that opportunity to share those stories.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on mic and going first to share your reflections. I appreciate that, Kimani. Would love to hear 2 more voices. Who else would like to share the impact? Just heard about common humanity, shared humanity. Let's hear others.
Hello, sorry, I'd like to share if I can, if I clear my throat. I was I shared with, there was 3 of us in the group, and we are from different regions presently, and it was just so literally enriching, inspiring, and uplifting. And it was so amazing how it was very distinctly different aspects of life situations that we each shared. And yet it really unified in that sense of resilience and transformation place that we're all able to have come to and continually moving with. And just sharing that was really, really empowering to realize how much life really is. There is a choice to work through transforming and bringing in richness to our stories, to our relationships, and to living that life out with and for others. Yeah. It was a great experience.
Wonderful, Dee. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Yes, the power of our stories in transformation. That was the title of today's session. And I think you just summarized it beautifully from that experience.
Mary has something on the chat. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, I see it. I'll read it out in a moment. I'm going to ask one more person to share, and then I'll read out Marie's before we move to close. One more on mic. Did I see you come on, PME? Did I say your name correctly?
Yes, yes. My school is in Lagos.
Fantastic. Were you going to share the impact of sharing your story?
Well, I'm stronger for it, better for it. Today, I can face the world stronger, better, and what adjective am I going to say? I'm imparting my word better, and then encouraging other women that in spite of all your challenges, you can come out greater and better, a better person, and then you can love your word better.
Wonderful.
Yes, you can love your word better. And then challenges are part of life.
Yeah.
We always have challenges. And then the resilient spirit gives us courage to go ahead. That's just it. And then your network actually helps you. There are people in your network that will encourage you to go ahead.
Wonderful.
Always. So
you know
we
what?
need to keep our relationship. Our relationships are very vital and important.
Wonderful. What I love about this work is you just summarized literally the impacts of the transformation outcome from resonance. I'm better for it, I'm stronger for it is literally the language when Tedeschi and Calhoun, the researchers that started looking into post-traumatic growth, said, well, what are the outcomes when people experience this thing we're calling post-traumatic growth? It was changes in self, changes in relationships, and changes in our orientation to the world. Changes in self was literally people saying, I am stronger, I am better. So there you have it. Thank you for being willing to step into that purpose for the work that you're doing. Now I see Charity had a hand up. So Charity, I'll give you the last word on this, and then I will read out the chat. Thank you. Charity?
Right, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just say this, that sharing my story, it made me to see what I should be thankful for. You know, sometimes to look as if it's only problems one sees, but during this meeting, I was able to reflect and see there are really things I am doing that I didn't believe many years ago I would be doing it at this time, this quickly, this soon, though I had desired them many years ago. Issues of having to have something inside that will be beneficial to the world around me, and then find people who needs it, and I am able to impact them. So there's something I'm thankful for. And I'm thankful, really, how God has helped me through the pandemic, and see how much more I need to cover.
Wonderful.
To be able to get to where I am.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Marie says it was a good feeling to briefly share our stories. I felt like even though I had been thinking about what I shared for years, reflecting on it at different life stages, it was empowering to be able to share it and celebrate it. Wonderful. Thank you to all of you who shared and for coming on and sharing with others. And I'm just going to ask others as well that didn't have a chance to come on mic just because we need to move to close. I just want to make some summary comments before I pass it to Joanne. Please add to the chat so that we can get a sense of the impact of this. So just to summarize and close, what the only thing different between what I shared earlier, the model I shared earlier, and now, this is the model that I have contributed to this work on post-traumatic growth and transformation, is this idea of resonance. And that to move from the story of now, or whatever the story is, was stuck into, and to move beyond bouncing back to bounce forward, the added ingredient is resonance. To get to that moment of awakening through our personal stories that opens space and creates that opportunity for transformative learning. And as I said earlier, that comes with a choice. We choose. And so the power of that means that at any given time, we can decide, you know what, this is what everybody else says, but this is what I am going to do and create because of this experience I've had in my life. And when we get there, usually nothing can take us away from that. So here are some of the outcomes that happen when we experience transformation through our resonance stories. We get really clear on our purpose. We connect to humanity. We heard that in the descriptions you gave here about the impacts. We are willing to go deeper in our spiritual and moral development. So I used just a basic example of, I fall down, I bruise myself earlier. And, you know, maybe before I wasn't even paying attention to the rock because, you know, I just didn't see it because I could go around it or whatever. Moral development says, once I become aware of the rock and now I've hurt myself, I am now willing to go further. Instead of going back, remember, bounce back is resilience. And this is why I say resilience is not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient for growth. Because I can bounce back and still be the same way I was before, where I'm like, okay, I healed. I don't need to worry about the rock anymore. But if I am going deeper in my development, I now care about humanity more. And therefore, I can no longer ignore the rock on the road and the fact that it is hurting people. So I take moral responsibility to be part of moving that rock so that it doesn't hurt people anymore. When we connect through resonance to transformation, we are willing to do the work that deeper development presents to us. We value life more, our own life and the life of others, and we are determined to act. And here's where I want to close. These are not just feel-good stories. What I've learned from the transformational leaders that I researched with and interviewed, and from my ongoing work over 10 years of doing this work, people who experience resonance move it to action. They get really clear, what do I want to be different in the world because of the experiences I've had and the emotions I've gone through, and what action am I willing to take? And then when they decide on that action, they put the work behind it through themselves and through others. They're not also trying to do it on their own. They work with community, they work with others, and they get the work done. It may change form because things change or they experience other challenges, but they focus on their purpose. This number one. Number 1 and number 5 are the anchors. They focus on purpose and they're determined to act. They have will, they have grit. And so this is the invitation we want to leave you with. As we celebrate our lives and really anchor to the value of our lives up until now, what are we going to choose from the place of our resonance stories as the actions we want to take in the world to make a difference for ourselves and others into the future? And just because I know Joanne is an educator, and here's a sort of human development stage-based model around a trauma-informed development model that gives you a sense of the stages we can go through in life from a lens of transcending trauma and transcending challenges. We have our socialized selves, it's just where we're born, what we're taught, what we learn. But then as we grow, and then we might have some seismic impact. These these little icons here represent traumatic impacts or seismic experiences. Again, they don't always have to be painful traumatic events, but they definitely are events that rock our world. That happens, and then we start to think differently. Like I go to college and I think, oh, how come not everybody grew up the way I did? And then we start to differentiate ourselves. We start to create the narratives that we want for ourselves now, in spite of our socialization. And then something else happens, like I fall down and bruise myself on that rock. And then now I start to think about myself in the context of society. It's not just me, it's other people. What is happening in the world? How do I change my worldview? And then that takes me, as I said, into deeper development, deeper spiritual and moral consciousness. And then I start to embed myself in taking actions that positively impact others. And then this stage, more things can happen that lead us to self in transcendence. Self in transcendence is out there. It's deep, deep spiritual development, holistic development, where we're not only thinking socially, but we're also thinking about people and planet. We're thinking about generations past and present. We're thinking that everything we do today will have an impact in perpetuity. And therefore, we're really intentional about the actions we take in the world. I often say, for me, as long as I can get people thinking about self in society, and then I'll invite you to challenge yourself that step further into self in transcendence, especially now in the world, as we think about climate change and all those things, the reminder that everything we do impacts the world, generations into the future. And how do we be really careful about the mark that we're leaving on this world? I am certainly thinking in my narrow sphere of influence in the work that I'm doing. Joanne mentioned we will lead Africa in creating a community of aspiring and experienced leaders of African descent on and off the continent that are willing to keep telling their stories, document their stories, creating a library of resonant stories of African leadership, because I realized that that didn't exist in the literature or the general zeitgeist today. And so that is an example, just to put myself in this conversation. It's work that I am doing and offering for my part. So and that is what I had to share. Joanne, I'll turn it over to you to connect this to what your hopes are for the masterclass, and just to see if there are any questions. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And it's been a joy to share resonant stories with you. You're on mute. And as Joanne comes on, if there's anything, I'm just going to look at the chat if you have any questions, or if there's any comments you want to share about the actions you are taking as you think about your resonant story, please also share those in chat. Joanne, I think you've lost sound, or you're saying something. So while Joanne, I think, is trying to come back on, again, feel free to share in chat. What actions are you being called to from the place of your resonant story or the work you're doing in the world? And if you have any questions for me, we have a few minutes. I'm happy to take one or two. Also, while I'm waiting to see if anything comes up and see if I can help Joanne. This is the word cloud you see in front of you came from a different resonance session where this is the impact people shared. And then also this is how you can connect with me. I will put in chat a link to a TEDx talk that I did that I talked about resonance as well, if you want to have another way of having something to connect to around resonance. So I will end the screen share just so that I can I think Joanne's trying to connect with me. I think I might have to let her back in. Give me a second. Right, everyone, if you don't mind hanging on a minute or two, I know that means we might take you a bit past 10:30. Joanne is just going to try to log off and log back in as our official host. I would like her to come on and close the session rather than close for her, but her screen froze. So she needs to log off and log back in. So if we can just bear with her a moment, give her an opportunity to do that. I'll just open the mic. Any questions from anyone around how I've used resonance stories to support people to plan for transformation, or any questions that have come up for you? I am more than happy to take those. And right now, I'm also going to try to share in the chat my TEDx talk for something that you can take away as well. Just give me a second. Just pulling that up. Any questions?
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please, Helen.
It's more of a comment. I want to just thank you for. My story is I'm actually writing a book because I believe. I would say, let me start from saying that COVID has made me realize that there's more to life.
Yeah.
Than yes, that's what COVID has. That's my take home for COVID. So my legacy is you are now focused on what you need, what will connect with you, using my story, and I've started experimenting it in business, in my way of life, and in everything. I would like to connect with you, please. Hope that's okay by you.
Wonderful, Helen. You broke up a bit, but yes, happy to connect. And even what you described, COVID making us realize there's more to life. That in itself is post-traumatic. Be very